Hello, welcome to the Pitcher Nail Down. I'm Big Italy 42. He's Scott Mailway, Get Sports 25 to Life. And as it seems to be the trend on Mondays, not a whole lot of good pitching options tonight. A couple guys you feel okay about. Starting at the top with Lance Lynn, minus 200 favorite against the Reds. He's expensive on DraftKings, 11-1, but he's 9,500 on FanDuel. He's probably your safest bet for tonight. It's also a Reds team that doesn't strike out a ton, though. 18.6%, I believe, against righties. So Lance Lynn, obviously a better play on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings if that price makes a difference to you. But there's also not a lot of batters you really feel like you need to have tonight. So Lance Lynn has got to just be your top option. I still think he should be one of your two pitchers on DraftKings, especially in your cash games.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's just the most consistent option on the board by far. There's really no one else that I feel comfortable with, honestly.
Yeah.
He's the way I'm going. I think the other guy I really like is Kyle Hendricks today. He's probably my second favorite option in terms of, I don't even know if I want to say consistency, but Colorado hasn't been great outside of Coors. Hendricks has looked pretty good over his last couple games. He's a pretty big favorite at minus 153, 7 over under. That's probably the way I'm going as a secondary option.
Yeah, and like you said, he's been consistent. He did have the struggles with the Reds in the last game, but he had 9 Ks to kind of mitigate that. But his 4 starts before that, 1 total earned run. So this guy has been really good. He's been really good against righties, and we know Colorado bats, maybe people are still chasing the big games, but obviously this is not Coors Field anymore. No big wind in Wrigley tonight either, so I think that he's a perfectly fine option.
Right, I definitely agree.
All right, other guys to consider, Anibal Sanchez is pretty much exactly what you picture when you think of a GPP play because he is a good pitcher and he has upside, but at the same time, this is a guy who's been very, very inconsistent. He's had a whole lot of struggles this year with the long ball, 1.44 per 9. Very bad. Similar fly ball and ground ball rate, right around 20 or 39% each. Strikeout rate 21.1% is okay, but still not a guy you feel great about. However, in tournaments against a team in Tampa Bay that really doesn't have any power upside, you don't worry so much about a guy that gives up a lot of long balls.
Right.
Tropicana Field, obviously a fine park for pitchers too. So Sanchez, you're not expecting a huge performance, but maybe something similar like what he did with the Cubs, 7 2/3, had 7 Ks. You could see 25 to 30 points out of him tonight at best, but you're probably thinking more in like the 18 to 25 type of range for him.
Yeah, he's been good at times and he's been really bad at times. I don't mind him. I just hate the price is the big thing. I don't like having to pay that price for him.
Yep.
It's a lot of the same way I feel about Chris Heston tonight, honestly. I like the matchup with Milwaukee with a lot of righties in that lineup. He's a minus 157 favorite. The over-under is only 7. There's a lot to like there. And then you see his price on DraftKings, and it's 9,500. I think he's a little overpriced on FanDuel too, isn't he?
He's actually not bad on FanDuel. He's 7,600. So
yeah, that's quite a bit more reasonable there. So he's probably a solid play on FanDuel for me. I'll be mixing him in. I thought he was 8,600. So that's definitely a much better price there. 9,500 on DraftKings. I just don't think I can pay that for how bad some of his bad starts have been. And while Milwaukee's been struggling again a little bit, they're still a lot better than they were early in the season. And especially against righties. With Brian Braun hitting now, Adam Lind obviously has been doing a good job against righties. Carlos Gomez looks healthy. Assuming none of these guys get traded before the game starts tonight.
Yeah.
I don't feel absolutely great about him for 9,500. At 76 on FanDuel, that's probably a solid way to go. The other guy that I like a decent amount today is Joe Kelly for Boston against the White Sox. We know the White Sox have really been struggling. They haven't been striking out a ton, but that's not really Joe Kelly's game anyway. So I think he's a decent punt option at 5,100 on DraftKings. I'm not going to play him on FanDuel. I don't think it's really worth punting pitcher on FanDuel very often ever unless it's like an actually really good play down there. On DraftKings, when you're taking 2 pitchers, I feel a little bit more okay about it. I think there's one other option on DraftKings that I would look at also, which is Kevin Gausman for Baltimore against Atlanta. Atlanta's another team that doesn't score a ton of runs, but also doesn't strike out very much. Only 17% strikeout rate against righties. But at 4,300, it's kind of hard to argue with throwing Gausman out there in some tournaments. He's put up, I believe, 2 20-plus fantasy point games. Only one of those is even remotely recently, but As a guy who looks like he can go 6 innings pretty consistently for 4,300, I have a really hard time arguing with him as a GPP play.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that. I mean, like you said, 4,300. You got a ton of batters that are more expensive than that,
Yeah.
and it seems like tonight's one of those nights where you can get your whatever pitcher you want and a solid hitting lineup on FanDuel, but DraftKings gonna be pretty tough to get two pitchers you feel even remotely good about and any sort of a lineup. So you're gonna have to make some sacrifices on DraftKings, whether it be your second starting pitcher, whether it be your hitters, whatever it may be. But a couple other options that I think are interesting tonight. After watching the Cleveland series, and as someone who lives in Ohio, if the Reds aren't on, it's the Indians. The Indians scored 5 runs in their entire series against the White Sox. Granted, they faced Chris Sale, so you get a pass for that game, but Carlos Rodon has not been a good pitcher this year, and he absolutely destroyed them. Obviously, he's a lefty, and they're much worse against lefties than righties, but Edison Volquez has actually been very good against left-handed batters. 270 WOBA allowed this season, a 2.4 ERA, so this is the guy that definitely has some success against lefties, and I mean, like I said, if you watch that series, they just look lost at the plate. There's not a single one of those hitters that looked like they had any sort of confidence come up to the plate. They got some young guys. Lindor, Aguilar was in there. I mean, a lot of these guys just don't look good. Even Michael Brantley still hasn't looked anything like what he did last year. So Volquez, I think, at 8,600, I think he's 86 on both sites, actually.
Yeah, I think he is too.
So, I mean, I think he's a fine option, and he's coming off one of his better starts of the season. So, obviously KC is going to need him to perform down the stretch. Now he's got his friend Johnny Cueto back, so he can have that little battle as who's going to be the ace like they did in Cincinnati a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I don't mind Volquez. Like you mentioned with Cleveland, I think a lot of that was how bad they are against lefties, but it's just a team that doesn't score a ton of runs in general. Volquez, like you said, looked really good last time out. He's definitely got good stuff. I don't mind him. And that same price range on DraftKings, at least. Nathan Carnes is another guy that I feel pretty similarly about. Detroit's been playing really good baseball since Cabrera went down, but they are really righty-heavy. Carnes has been pretty solid against righties, a minus 130 favorite in this one. I mean, the most important thing is he doesn't cost 5 digits like Sanchez and Lynn and those other guys do to me. Biggest problem is Tampa Bay hasn't been putting any runs on the board, and Anibal Sanchez isn't, despite the fact that he's given up a decent amount of runs in 3 of his last 6 starts, he's not a guy that I want to count on for my team giving me run support against. So that's probably my biggest concern there. But I think Carnes is a decent GPP play against a really righty-heavy Detroit lineup.
Yeah, and like you said, I think he's a better play on DraftKings because he's unlikely to get the win there. Only 1 win in his last 5 starts, even though he really had that bad start against KC, but was actually pretty damn good in all the other starts. So
yeah, he's been really, really solid. I mean, I think I played him 2 of the last 5 times he's pitched, which I know doesn't sound like a ton, but I'm pretty sure I played him against the Yankees and Philly, and like you said, he got blown up against Kansas City. I didn't play him that day, thankfully. Yeah. But he's been a guy that's been pitching 6+ innings most of the time out. He's been pretty consistent. It's just tough because he's not really a cash game play when you're facing the Tigers lineup with the Tampa Bay lineup behind you. Yeah. So that's what gives you the biggest problems there. Outside of that, there's no one that I'm really that excited about. I think Alex Wood is a decent candidate for some strikeouts just because he's facing Baltimore. But they got a pretty good offense, and Atlanta's another team that you don't want to count on for run support either. So that's probably more of a DraftKings play. At 7,100 there, I think you can mix him into some GPPs. There's really no one else in that price range unless you're going to look at someone like Jorge De La Rosa, which I refuse to play. Yeah, so, I mean, you're looking, I think he's the only guy in the 7,000s besides De La Rosa. Oh, Mike Montgomery also. I don't know how I feel about Montgomery. You got any feelings on him tonight?
I mean, nothing strong either way, honestly. I mean, we've seen his upside, but we've also seen him be really bad. Some starts. And what bothers me in this one is that Arizona, despite the big-time park shift to Safeco, is much better against lefties than they are against righties. So, I mean, he certainly has potential, but he's still not a big strikeout guy. I mean, he had 2 in his last start. He had at 9, but then before that, 3, 2. So, I mean, without really any strikeout upside, he's almost going to have to hope for some batted ball success against a team that hits lefties really well. And I don't like banking on that.
No, and I mean, he's been really struggling with pitch count, too. I mean, he had those back-to-back complete games when he first kind of burst onto the scene there, but then since then, he's only reached 6 full innings 1 time.
Yep.
And he's been 100-plus pitches, I believe, in each of the games except Detroit, where he just got absolutely murdered in the 3rd inning. But I mean, if he's going to have control issues and he's still not striking guys out, it's going to be tough. And I personally like Alex Wood quite a bit more in that price range than him. That's probably the way I'm going, just because of the strikeout upside. Plus, Wood's been pitching pretty deep into games lately, which has been nice. I think probably the only other guy I would really look at would be, I don't even really like it, but I would look at Cody Anderson, I guess, because he has a little bit of upside. But, 8,100 on DraftKings is ridiculous. I can't see paying that against a Kansas City team that just has been able to put runs on the board basically against everyone. But Anderson's been really solid outside of this last game against Milwaukee. Yeah. He just hasn't been 8,100 solid, but he's been going deep into games. I think he went 6 2/3 in all 4 of his starts prior to that last one when he got rocked by Milwaukee. So I'm going to look at him more on FanDuel where he's a little bit cheaper, but even that's just a GPP play for me. None of these guys really stand out towards the bottom here. We're talking about John Danks, who's a big target. Raziel Iglesias, I don't want to play him against St. Louis, even though he's only 5,500 on DraftKings. Von Nova at Texas doesn't excite me at all at 6,600. There's a lot of pick'em games today, which makes it kind of tough. Plus, there's not a lot of good pitchers on the mound.
Yeah. There's one more guy I'll consider in GPPs. Once again, more so on FanDuel where he has a better price. Robbie Ray against Seattle. Okay. You've got Mark Trumbo and Nelson Cruz that hit lefties pretty well. Trumbo really hasn't so much since he came over. Obviously, Cruz is going to be a big target in your lineups tonight. But as a whole, this is a pretty lefty-heavy team in Seattle that doesn't hit lefties particularly well. They're 21st in the league in Team WOBA so far this season against lefties. And Robbie Ray, 287. Only 14 2/3 innings so far. Only faced 57 lefties. But 287 WOBA to lefties is not bad. So, I think that he'll be a low-owned guy that can get you 20 to 25 on DraftKings, maybe 10 to 12 on FanDuel. But once again, you don't feel great about his chances for getting the win because it's not like he's a big favorite. In fact, he's an underdog in this game. But I have more faith in the Arizona lineup scoring some runs than I do Seattle. So, in what's close to a pick'em, I don't think he's that bad of an option tonight.
Yeah, I don't mind him too much either. My biggest thing was that he's facing an Arizona lineup that is facing a lefty, which always scares me a little bit. Like you mentioned, though, Seattle lefty heavy. I think that's probably the biggest reason to use him at 8,000 there. Yep. It's pretty hard to argue with as a GPP play, like most of these guys we've mentioned are. As far as cash games go, I think it's got to be Lance Lynn, Kyle Hendricks, and then Alex Wood's probably my third option if I'm not going all the way down to Joe Kelly, which I don't feel great about. So.
Yeah, and I don't feel too bad about Volquez either. I don't think that he gets blown up. I think he's an okay option.
Yeah, that's true. He's just a little pricey for me at 8,600, but
yeah,
pretty hard to argue with considering how bad the rest of the pitchers on the slate are.
Yeah, so hopefully next Monday we have some better pitchers to break down for you. But that's it for today. Thanks for hanging out with us. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out our other podcasts, our Optimizer Colossus, our cheat sheets. A lot of great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.